So Apple's 3-day release of their M4 Max just happened. And today we're going to go over some of the highlights of those events and some of the reasons why these new M4 Max might be worth getting for you. And the goal is that you'll at least learn a couple things that you haven't learned anywhere else or in Apple's own events. As you can see right on Apple's own website, these Macs are the highlights. Right beneath Apple Intelligence is here. And yeah, these all talk about being built more for Apple Intelligence, even though M1 through M4 can all use Apple Intelligence. So I'm really interested to see how different the M1 chip is versus the M4 to actually running and using Apple's generative AI models. But first, why don't we talk about the iMac? This is what Apple started with in their event as well. Starts at $1,300. None of these devices actually had a price increase, which is really impressive actually. They also say new vibrant colors. And I'm telling you, these colors, they're not really different. If I pull up the M3 iMac, look, we got basically the same shade of blue, basically the same shade of purple, slightly different pink, probably a more pink over here, which that one is better, I think. Almost the exact same orange, slightly brighter yellow, and a slightly brighter green. And then silver is basically the exact same as well. So, is it better? Probably. I don't think I dislike the new colors, but at the same time, I don't really think this is like a feature they should be advertising by any means. They just tweaked them a little bit. So this is the baseline iMac with the 2 ports, not the 4 ports. So let's compare it with the old M3, see what's all changed. So obviously it's the M4 chip, but it starts with 8 CPU cores and 8 GPU cores. Just saying, that is less cores than the iPad Pro, because if you look at the M4 iPad Pro here, even the binned version still has 9 CPU cores and the full 10-core GPU. Now, it does only have 8 GB of RAM, where now the new M4 iMac starts at 16 GB of RAM versus having an 8 GB option as the baseline. And they didn't raise the price at all, so that is still really impressive. Don't want to downplay that at all. And everything else, stats-wise, are pretty much exactly the same, especially on this cheaper version. Still just 2 Thunderbolt USB-C 4 ports. You can get it up to gigabit Ethernet. Then if you move up to the 4-port option, and we'll do that for both of them here. So this one starts at $1,500, which honestly isn't a dramatic difference in price, but it's $200, which isn't nothing. But for $200, you get the full 10-core CPU, the full 10-core GPU, where the previous M3 only went up to an 8-core CPU. You still get that 16 GB of RAM standard, but you can go up to 32 GB of RAM now. And for that price with the M3, you still would have only had 8 GB as starting memory, which is just pretty sad. But it is now 16 over here, and it can go all the way up to 32, which is really nice to see. This is for both of them as well, but the camera is now a center stage camera with desk view. So basically carrying over features that came to the iPads first, which I guess it's pretty common for Macs these days to take iPad features, like the M4 chip that came on the iPads first, but anyway, that's semantics. But this is basically an ultra-wide camera that just crops in to follow you around as you move, which honestly for a desktop monitor, that's pretty handy because it's a lot harder to move that monitor around than even an iPad. And having desk view built right in is pretty cool too. Seems like the speakers are pretty much the same and the mics are pretty much the same. The new Magic accessories are USB-C though now, which that is nice to see, but otherwise design-wise or how the Magic Mouse works is not going to change at all. So if you don't like them, they're not going to be any better that way. And now it's got 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is really nice to see. Full Thunderbolt on all 4 of them, where on the previous you only got 2 Thunderbolt, which wasn't even Thunderbolt 4, but just 2 Thunderbolt ports and 2 USB 3 ports. So hopefully that showed you something new about the differences between those 2 models that you didn't see before. And obviously if you're coming from an even older iMac, there's going to be even better improvements. Especially if you're coming from an Intel one, these M series iMac are just gonna blow it out of the water. So if I were to recommend a generic model for most people looking for an iMac out there, I would probably say the second option on Apple's website right here. Obviously you can spec it more fine-tuned to your own liking, and that's definitely an option you can go for. Like I might make the storage a little bit higher, kind of like this one here. But for most people, 256 would probably still be enough storage. I really wish Apple didn't start their Macs that low on storage. I wish this was 512, but they did up the RAM, so we should count our blessings here, I guess, instead of complain too much. But yeah, I do think 512 is a better starting, but for $200 more, is that worth it? I don't know. I think this is a pretty good middle ground for most people because you get the full 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is huge. Besides just the 2 Thunderbolt ports, which aren't even Thunderbolt 4. So honestly, I feel like having the unbinned chip and the 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, gigabit Ethernet, and it's starting at 16 gigabytes of memory now. This is a pretty stinking great option for most people out there looking for a new iMac. But if you want to get an even better value Mac, I'm thinking you might want to go for the Mac Mini, especially if you already have a monitor, if you already have a keyboard and mouse, things like that, where you don't need those things. They would be nice with the iMac, and all-in-one machines are really nice for a lot of things, but you just want to save even more money and maybe even get more performance. Well, that's where the Mac Mini comes into play. And personally, this is the Mac that they announced that is the most tempting to me. I mean, just look at it. It's kind of cute, you know? It's so small, which it is like less than half the size of the previous Mac Mini. And the M4 Pro chip is pretty nuts. I love that they kind of make it look more like the Mac Studio now too, where it's basically just like a scaled down version of the Mac Studio that gives you some of those ports in the front like the Mac Studio has. Although I really wish it did have an SD card slot. Personally, I don't need it that much, but I do know for a lot of creators out there, it is a very, very useful port. And I think they would have had even more sales if they could put that on there as well. But I'm also not going to complain because honestly, the ports are great on the Mac Mini. You got a headphone jack and 2 USB-C ports on the front. And then you have the power cable, Ethernet, an HDMI port, and 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports. Or if you get the M4 Pro, you get 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports. This was the first Mac to have Thunderbolt 5. And they gave it on the little mini, and I think that's awesome. Although I do think it's a little funny that they had to stuff the power button on the bottom because they actually ran out of space on the device itself with how small it is. And they claim, even with this small size, that it's still really able to cool the device well, which that is great. And I'm not that surprised, honestly. If you've seen any breakdowns of the M1 and M2 Mac Minis, you'll see that almost all of the insides was empty space because they reused the same shells from the Intel Mac Minis, and they just did not need that much space. They were just empty in there. So they basically just got rid of the empty space and optimized the design a little bit more, which is good. And honestly, it saves materials too. And the Mac Mini can now do up to 3 displays, which is awesome to see. They really like to show this Mac Mini alongside their studio display a lot. I think they're trying to tell us something and they want us to buy them together. I'm pretty sure half of all of these little mini events talked about Apple Intelligence. And again, Apple Intelligence is on the M1 through M4 chips. So it is not something exclusive to these Macs by any means. Now they do have a better neural engine that's supposed to improve AI performance pretty significantly. But again, I kind of want to see it to believe it. I've not seen a big improvement of Apple Intelligence on my iPad versus anything else I've tried. And this is the M4 chip as well. So I'm just kind of interested to see how much better in practical testing is the M4 chip in AI versus the M1. I also kind of think they show the Mac Mini from top-down shots a lot because I do believe it is taller than it used to be. Not by a lot, but it is a little bit. I mean, I don't think this is to scale right here, these two Mac Minis, but I think it's pretty close. It's not like it's just gonna take up literally no space or it's like the size of an Apple TV quite. It is 5 inches by 5 inches, but it's still a decent amount tall. So it's still very, very small and very, very impressive, but it's not like it's worlds different. But yeah, the previous Mac Mini never got the M3 chip, so this is a pretty significant step up. So a lot of these up twos are showing it based on the Pro chip because it can have that. So this direct comparison is not showing too much of the baseline M4 to the baseline M2. But yeah, it can go up to 14 core CPU now, 20 core GPU, both better core counts than this, double the memory, which is really, really nice to see. And the amount of performance cores on the M4 Pro chip is nuts. 10 performance cores and just 4 efficiency cores versus 8 performance and 4 efficiency cores. And the performance cores are what give you the biggest boost in power. Adding 2 more of those with the whole architecture just being optimized in general, this chip is going to be crazy. I've heard a lot of people say this, and I agree with them wholeheartedly. The M4 Pro chip is the star of this refresh right now. M4 Max isn't bad by any means, but it's still very similar to how the M3 Max was laid out and everything like that. With the M4 Pro is going to be significantly better than the M2 and M3 Pro. And in some ways, it's going to be beating the M3 Max chip, which just came out last year, and that shouldn't really be happening. It's got almost 300 gigabytes per second memory bandwidth. That's nuts. Looks like it's also got a new AV1 decode engine, which is nice. But yeah, here you can see the baseline M4 chip with the M2 chip here. And yeah, it still comes with the full 10-core CPU, 10-core GPU, and 16-core neural engine. There's only 8-core CPU here. So that is really nice to see as well. And again, look at this beautiful, beautiful sight. It starts at 16 gigabytes of RAM. No more 8 gigabyte starting option at all. That is really, really awesome. And then the starting RAM for the M4 Pro is 24 gigabytes. And that's also an upgrade for the regular M4, and the M4 Max is out at 32 gigabytes, where the M4 Pro starts at 24, they can go up to 48 or 64. So kind of interesting, the M4 Pro isn't actually able to get the 32 gigabyte option anymore, where that was the previous max of the M2 Pro chip. And they basically have the exact same storage options. And yeah, the M4 chip supports up to 3 displays, the actual baseline M4 chip, which is awesome because it used to be only 3 displays when you had the M2 Pro chip in the Mac Mini, but now it's just 3 displays flat out. See, it's about 0.6 inches taller than the previous Mac Mini, but it's almost a good 3 inches less on width and depth. And then yeah, it's almost half the weight. So this is much smaller and much lighter. Most of the other tech specs are pretty much identical, except when you come to the ports, you get 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the M4 versus only 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the M2. Then on the M4 Pro, you get 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports, which these Thunderbolt 5 ports are kind of nuts. They can go up to 120 gigabits per second versus just 40 on the previous Thunderbolt 4. So potentially 3 times the speed, which is really nice to see coming to the Mac Mini. And then as those 2 front USB-C ports, like I showed earlier, instead of having 2 USB-A ports, which I think is the right move. We're going to USB-C and everything right now. USB-A can be dead for all I care. So yeah, what model of the M4 Mac Mini would I recommend to those out there? Well, I think the baseline $600 M4 Mac Mini is probably the best bet for most people. You still get 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, and you could easily buy an external SSD to put more storage on and have it plugged into one of those Thunderbolt 4 ports. And they're so fast that it will almost be like internal storage, just a little bit slower. You can keep all your like really current stuff on the Mac Mini itself, and then just start putting things off to like a 4 or 8 terabyte external SSD and get all your extra storage that way. I honestly don't know if it's really worth upgrading to just a 512, maybe for an extra 200, but you can still probably buy a external SSD that's more space than that for around the same price. And with the way Thunderbolt is, I don't really know if having it be internal storage is just that much better, unless you plan on taking this little Mac Mini with you all the time and you just don't want to have a dongle. But I mean, it's not that big a deal. I think the baseline is good, or maybe this $1,000 one with 24 gigabytes of memory and 512 storage. That's pretty good too. But honestly, if you're feeling like the base Mac Mini isn't going to be good enough for you, I'd probably go right to the M4 Pro Mac Mini. Because even just this base one, you get 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports, 512 gigs of storage, 24 gigabytes of unified memory, 12 CPU cores, 16 GPU cores, all for $1,400. That's pretty phenomenal. It may seem like a lot more than both of these, and yeah, it's actually more than double the price of the baseline Mac Mini. but you're getting a lot more performance, and you're getting almost double the memory, and you are getting double the storage. So there's a lot going into this, and I think this is a really good option for a lot of people out there. But if you gotta max out that performance, adding extra 200 for the full 14-core CPU and 20-core GPU is pretty stinking awesome as well. I don't really know who's gonna need to go up to that 64 gigabytes of unified memory, especially not the 8 terabytes of internal storage here, or the 10 gigabit Ethernet, because that goes up to almost $5,000. A lot of people pointed out that a Mac Studio costing around this much might actually be worse in performance because of the M4 Pro chip right now, and the Mac Studios have not gotten refreshed at all. So yeah, you could max this thing out like pretty crazily, but almost no one's putting 8 terabytes of storage in there, maybe 1 terabyte. So let's bring that down a little bit. And we'll keep the memory maxed out and the chip maxed out, and that's $2,500. And honestly, for what you're getting, that's barely more than like a baseline M4 Pro MacBook Pro. And this is maxing out memory, maxing out the chip, 1 terabyte of storage. There's nothing wrong with this option right now. I think this is how much I paid for my M1 Pro 16 gigabyte, 1 terabyte MacBook Pro a few years ago. And this is way more performance and power than that one. So yeah, it doesn't come with a monitor and a keyboard built in, and it's a desktop machine, but this is a killer value in a lot of ways. I am incredibly tempted to get a Mac Mini. I probably wouldn't need one this beefed out, but I want one like this. This is the specs I want, but I just don't really know if the price and everything about it is worth that right now. And I have my M4 iPad Pro and an iPad Mini here, and I honestly just don't know if I really need a Mac again. I haven't really run into any scenarios where I feel like I need a Mac. But lastly, we're going to talk about the MacBook Pro, which did get some pretty interesting updates. So obviously it got the M4 chip, the M4 Pro, and the M4 Max. They actually do have better battery life than the previous MacBook Pros, which is nice to see that improved. A lot of this website has been talking about like features that all Macs have, which is kind of interesting, but all right. They made the SDR brightness 1000 nits now, still the same peak 1600, but 1000 nits is certainly better for outdoor use and in bright environments. And speaking of that, they also come with a nano texture display option as well, which I didn't mention before, but the iMac also comes with that as well too. So now pretty much all of Apple's more pro devices that have screens are coming with nano texture now. The iMac, the MacBook Pros, the iPad Pro, and the Studio Display and Pro XDR display. So I kind of wonder if they're going to bring them to the Air devices anytime soon, like the iPad Air and the MacBook Airs, but they might leave that as more of like a pro kind of workflow feature, and I think that's all right too. They also got that 12 megapixel center stage camera upgrade that the iMac got, which gives desk view as well, and the center stage capability where it's keeping you in frame constantly, which is really nice. Same mics, same speakers, and the Pro and Max chips came with that new Thunderbolt 5, like the Mac Mini, which is great because that's just a better technology in general. But yeah, this 14-inch baseline M4 MacBook Pro is honestly a lot better than it used to be. I mean, it's got the full unbinned 10-core CPU, 10-core GPU, can go up to 32 gigabytes of memory, great media engine encoders and decoders here, and it starts at 16 gigabytes. So now like everything is starting at 16 gigabytes, which is just a relief. The M4 Pro chips are starting at 24 standard for everyone. It just makes the M4 Pro, again, just look so much better. And looks like the M4 Max will start at 36 gigabytes. So the baseline M4 chip on the MacBook Pro 14-inch is looking pretty good. Definitely better than the last year's M3 MacBook Pro because you lost one of the Thunderbolt ports and stuff like that. Now, it's only going to be Thunderbolt 4, not Thunderbolt 5 on these 3 USB-C ports, but that is plenty for most people, especially if you're looking at the baseline M4 MacBook Pro. And as far as any recommendations I would make, honestly, if you're looking to just get into the MacBook Pro line, just mainly to take advantage of the new screen, new camera, and everything like that, but you don't need just like insane performance, the baseline here is going to be pretty good. And this baseline starts at 512, which is honestly really nice. way nicer than the iMac or the Mac Mini that starts at $256 still. So that's good to see. And $1,600 for having a built-in screen, 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, and that MagSafe port, and a bunch of other stuff for connectivity, and it just being that portable and light MacBook Pro. This is a really, really good value, especially now that it's up to 16 gigabytes of RAM. I just can't tell you how much more of value these devices are now with that, because that used to be a $200 upgrade for all of them, and I basically wouldn't even consider buying a MacBook or a Mac without at least 16 gigabytes of RAM, and that's why I could never get base models before. But now, all the base models are actually pretty stinking good. So I think the M4 Pro chip is kind of the way to go here. This is like the exact configuration I got when it was the M1 Pro, and if I bought a MacBook Pro again, this is the exact configuration I would get again, but you're getting way more now. You're getting more RAM because this used to be only 16 gigabytes of unified memory right here. And the cores are better as well. And not only are the cores just better technology with the new second generation 3 nanometer technology, but there's also just more cores, 14 core CPU and a 20 core GPU. This thing is awesome. And 1 terabyte of storage, that's a perfect amount. All this for $2,400, that's good. I'm just saying this is probably the MacBook to get for anyone out there. And if you want the 60-inch, it doesn't actually have like a default configuration that has the same M4 Pro chip with 1 terabyte of storage. So this is kind of the closest one there, but you can select this one and customize it further to add either more memory or just that 1 terabyte of storage, which basically just shows that the bigger screen, you're paying $300 more for 2 extra inches of screen. So if that's worth it to you or not, I don't know. You'll have to make that choice. Now, people have tested and shown that the 16-inch also has a better thermal and sustained performance, so you do get that as a benefit as well. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, I showed you something new about these devices that you did not know beforehand, or I was able to help you make a decision on which Mac you want to get for yourself. I don't know if I'm going to be getting any of these for the channel yet, but if you guys are really wanting me to review a certain kind of Mac, let me know down in the comments below and I will consider it. Honestly, the biggest thing is right now, I don't have a big budget to go out and buy new technology like this. And none of the Macs here, besides the Mac Mini, is that cheap. And that's why that's the one I'm considering the most. But I also don't really know if I want to move away from my iPad only setup. I don't know. I kind of like using just iPads. So let me know in the comments below if you're getting any of these Macs, which one you're getting, and if you wished Apple did anything differently, or if you're super happy with how Apple updated these. Let me know all that down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share it, and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers before the end of the year here. If you can please subscribe, that would really help me out and get me to my Christmas present goal of that 5,000. I have so much more content coming on this channel. I want to talk about the iPad mini I have right here running this camera more in a future video as well. I have more things to talk about with e-ink tablets as well, and the M4 iPad, and even Apple Intelligence. There's so much more content on iPads and e-ink and all that stuff coming. Please stay tuned for that. And if you're curious about the setup at all going to be linked in the description down below. As always, have a great rest of your day.